Alright, we're going to talk about G3 oiling today. For those that don't know, the oil pump is crank driven. So obviously it mounts down through in here. Now, one of the things that we're actually kind of blessed with in the G3 world is the sump, the pickup in the oil pump only uses 5/8 inch diameter. So on the restriction side, or the inlet side, there's not much of a restriction compared to, like I said, the old 440s or the G2 Hemi. And G2 Hemi was a 1/2 inch and the old 440 was 3/8. That was one of the tricks with the old 440s, is enlarging it to a 1/2 inch pipe. So anyway, let's get past that. So you get oil coming out of the pump in through this passage. This passage comes through, feeds the oil filter. The oil filter comes up through, feeds this passage here, and this passage comes up and then hits there. Now, comes in, hits this passage, splits, feeds the number 1 crank journal, comes up and hits the main oil galley. Now, the main oil galley obviously feeds each one of the crank journals. Now, the main galley, before it hits the number 2 cam journal and before it hits the number 4 cam journal, there's a V-split. I'll get focused in on that later. There's a V-split that comes up, hits each one of these MDS solenoids, and then comes up through the top of the block, feeds the head. We'll slide this back here. That hole there at the top of the block feeds that slot, comes up. Oil comes up through the head bolt hole, then into this passage, into the rocker arm, then down through the hollow push rod into the lifter. Now, this is where things get interesting. These blocks, the lifter oiling is split off into 4 quadrants. Each NDS cavity or solenoid is responsible for 4 lifters. All right. Now, something a lot of people don't realize is there's a blockage in this lifter galley that keeps it flowing from front to back. That's why, like I said, it's split off into 4 quadrants. When the MDS is activated, the only oil going to the, let's put that in there, that little plunger is, when the MDS is activated, this plunger comes down and blocks off this hole. And at that point, when the MDS is activated, the only oiling going to the lifters is from the push rod. All right, so your oil goes up through, again, goes up through, hits the rocker, comes down in the push rod, feeds the lifter. When the MDS is not activated, or if the MDS is deleted, and we can take that little guy out because it's no longer important, the lifters are fed from both the cavity and the rockers. All right. Just thought I'd point that out because there's a lot of confusion about the MDS solenoid and why, from a performance point of view, you have to get rid of the MDS. If you want the lifters to survive, you need to get rid of the MDS in order to be performance oriented. And quite honestly, if you're not performance oriented, getting rid of the MDS, you might lose maybe. My experience is I've lost 1 mile to 2 miles per gallon depending on how I drive. Alright, so let's get into some little closer things here. So like I said, you got these passages here that come up, and that's the passage that feeds the head, feeds the bottom of the MDS. You can see the feed hole a little better here on this section. Comes up and then obviously feeds off. Now you can see right there is the O-ring for the MDS plug. All right. And the reason that's important is when the MDS is activated, all the excess oil comes out this hole right here, that hole there, and obviously on the other two. So again, remember these blocks are split up into a 4 quadrant. You got 1 and 3, 2 and 4, 5 and 7, 6 and 8. Okay, so if an MDS solenoid fails, it's only going to affect one quadrant of the block. I think that's actually kind of it. And for those who are curious, yes, that is how thick these pre-eagle blocks can be. This one actually has got a little bit of core shift to it. If you measure this out, and when it's sonic tested, this came up to I think 180 something, 189, 188. But in major thrust area on the passenger side of the block, it's damn near quarter inch. So I will do a video later on about taking one of these out to a 4.0, 4.03. I have gone 408. I don't suggest that at all. That motor came apart. A lot of that was my fault. Willing to admit it, I effed up. So that's about it, really. Any comments? I'm sure I probably missed something. If not, I'll talk to you next video. All right, thank you guys.